everybody to the captain's spot. I'm your host, Justin Freeman, 6 foot 1 inches, 275 pounds, fantasy knowledge. It's week 11. It's Thursday night. Season's flying by. We've got an awesome showdown slate for you tonight. Cardinals at Seahawks. First place, NFC West, up on the line. This game's got a 57.5 point total. Cardinals, road dogs, 3 points in favor of the Seahawks here. Kyler playing out of his mind. Russell Wilson playing like a human being lately. What will we see here in this game? Vegas thinks Seahawks ought to be favored here by a field goal. This spread has risen as high as 4.5 at a point, gone down to 3, settled on a key number there. Looks like it should be a really close game. Could be an absolute shootout. Should be a lot of fun for showdown purposes. So, without further ado, why don't we hop into the injury report here, where we're going to be getting Carlos Hyde back. Be a welcome addition to the run game for the Seattle Seahawks. Chris Carson, on the other hand, status remains very much up in the air. Don't know if we're going to get him. Report from Adam Schefter yesterday indicated that Chris Carson not likely to play in this game. So, we will proceed as if Chris Carson will not play. But I can't begin to tell you how big of a dynamic change that is if he does play versus if he doesn't. So obviously want to keep that in mind, want to keep your eye on the news, want to certainly be looking at inactives 90 minutes before lock and make sure we see Chris Carson's name listed as inactive. Tyler Lockett, another guy who's on the injury report earlier this week, he is likely to play per reports. He's listed as questionable. We think he'll play. I do think he'll see a reduced number of targets in this game. If his injury status is any indication of that, I think he'll mostly be out there running wind sprints. I think it's going to be DK Metcalf's game. We've seen him crush and be matchup proof in the past. I think he has a great spot here, does Metcalf. Travis Homer listed as doubtful as we're talking about running back depth over on the Seattle side. Don't think we're going to be getting him, but that'll kind of do it there for the Seattle side. And big beneficiaries of Tyler Lockett is going to be a little dinged up. David Moore get a little bump in playing time perhaps, or maybe just Lockett's out there the whole time and not running as efficient routes as we've seen from him in the past. On the Cardinals side, pretty much everybody healthy. Got a couple of tight ends listed as questionable right now. Max Williams, Daryl Daniels, they're both listed as questionable. The third tight end on the roster is Dan Arnold. Dan Arnold's clear, so it's possible that he could see a little bit of an ascension there if there are actual limitations to Williams and Daryl Daniels. So that kind of does it for the injury report. I think we can get a little bit into the pricing now as we talk about the quarterbacks on this slate. Kyler Murray, $13K, and Russell Wilson, $11,800. So two guys who have had tremendous years so far. Russell Wilson, just those first 4 games from Russell Wilson playing out of his mind, with just ridiculously unsustainable levels of production. And of course, he was just setting record-breaking numbers at the quarterback position. Of course it fell off, right? Now, Kyler Murray, on the other hand, has managed to sustain tremendous rushing production. Has been extremely useful, been maybe the best quarterback in fantasy football this season. As we look at the running backs, Kenyan Drake and Chase Edmonds sort of highlight the Arizona rotation. And Kenyan Drake made his return after missing a week and a bye week there in week 10. Kenyan Drake saw 52% of the team's snaps. That's down a little bit from his season average, which is around 60%. And Chase Edmonds saw 49% of the team's snaps. So it's just those two guys. There's no need to look any deeper than Kenyan Drake or Chase Edmonds there. But what do we expect moving forward? We thought there was an opportunity there for Chase Edmonds to sort of begin unseating Kenyan Drake. Shortly before Kenyan Drake got hurt. But, Drake came back, took on 44% of the team's rush attempts. That compares to 22% for Chase Edmonds last week. We're not seeing this huge rushing load for Chase Edmonds as long as Kenyan Drake's there. You know who's really stealing the rushing work in this offense? Kyler Murray, which makes his $13,000 salary palatable. I think you just have to try to find ways to get those quarterbacks in there. However, I'll just encourage you on a very expensive slate to consider ways in which these quarterbacks might not make the lineup. It's possible that these quarterbacks pay off their receivers in such a way that the salary restricts the quarterback. I hope that makes sense. Imagine a situation where Russell Wilson, provides a 100-yard game to Metcalf, a 100-yard game to Tyler Lockett, scores a touchdown via David Moore. Another passing score, maybe even, or what about a rushing score in a big day for Carlos Hyde? Like, in that case, Russell Wilson had a great game, but perhaps the way the salaries work, you needed the other guys in there. Just a way to think about how to make the slate unique for you personally. But back to Kenyan Drake and Chase Edmonds, we're thinking about how this is most likely to work forward. 22% of the team's rushes is among the highest numbers for Chase Edmonds this year, outside of the 1 week that he was a starter and earned 68% of the team's rushes. So it is possible Chase Edmonds digging a little bit into Kenyan Drake's workload. I wouldn't read too much into it. I think it's pretty clear they just want Kenyan Drake to be their primary back out of the run game, and Chase Edmonds to be their primary passing down back. I think it's just that simple. You could try to get early on predicting an Edmonds breakout or something like that. But the fact that Edmonds didn't just, completely shine in week 9, remember the week he was just complete chalk there in DFS, week 9, I don't think we're going to see the coaching staff try to force it to Edmonds. But what makes Edmonds still viable is the fact that he's involved in the passing game. He's going to see about 3 times more targets on average than Kenyan Drake is. So that's something we got to take into account for sure as we're talking about playing those guys. And this is a PPR format that we're talking about. Chase Edmonds could get there. And especially if you think this game could get sideways in favor of the Seahawks, then possibly you see a bit more Chase Edmonds on the field than you see Kenyan Drake. So a lot of different ways to go there. I don't think there's a right answer. I think we'll find out that both those guys are very, very close in terms of projection. And both of them are having very little amount of rushing touchdown equity so long as Kyler Murray is as devastating as he is running the football, piling up massive numbers of touchdowns. At the running back position for Seattle, we mentioned Chris Carson's availability, very much in question this week, 8,400. You'll see the Sims have Chris Carson in them right now. I'll be updating those to show Chris Carson out and posting those over on numberball.com, premium DFS subscription website. Make sure you are keeping your eye up over there. But so Carlos Hyde at 5,200 actually gives us a really, really cheap part of a viable piece of this game. 5,200, if we can get Carlos Hyde, what I'd have him projected at is around 50 to 55% of the team's rush attempts, with a little bit going to Alex Collins and a little bit going to DJ Dallas, who's not pictured here on your screen. But DJ Dallas, a guy who's going to be priced at $600 this week. Again, Travis Homer listed as doubtful. So how do we approach this? I think, you could try playing Alex Collins or DJ Dallas, but I think just playing Carlos Hyde is the simplest way to get guaranteed cheap points into your lineup, provided that Chris Carson is indeed out. Let's talk about the pass catchers, because this is where it gets really fun. DeAndre Hopkins, 10-8. DK Metcalf, 10-2. Tyler Lockett down at 9-4. I think Lockett's a guy that, given the injury situation, I don't think he's even supposed to be playing, honestly. And I'm no injury expert doctor type, but from the people I do read who are those types of people are really surprised that Tyler Lockett's suiting up in this game. So at 9,400, I need a bit more certainty that he's going to pay off. I think what this most likely means is that DK Metcalf gets 2 more targets than he was supposed to get in this game. David Moore maybe gets another target or 2 than he was supposed to get in this game. So I'm more interested in fading Lockett, and I get that you could strategically, be heavy on Lockett here, and it might pay off. And it might. Obviously, we're talking about large field tournaments and Showdown. We know how that works. But ultimately, I want to prioritize Metcalf as just a way to absolutely blow the ceiling off in this game. DeAndre Hopkins, 10-8. I don't need to tell you about DeAndre Hopkins. You know the deal. He's going to get 30% of the team's targets. Christian Kirk, a guy whose role has grown, he kind of struggled to just sort of separate himself from Larry Fitzgerald in terms of target market share in this game, but over the season. But it's no longer a contest. Kirk has pulled ahead and has also shown a tremendous ceiling, big play, big splash play ability, which is super attractive in Showdown. So if you can get a 50-yard touchdown out of Christian Kirk, I don't need to tell you any more about what that does to the slate. That's going to obviously change everything. I do want to bring up Andy Isabella, 2K. Andy Isabella is a dude who we can certainly consider playing. He's been a bit up and down in terms of like routes run. Like saw one of his lowest games of the season last week, 23% of the routes run, as opposed to 100% for Hopkins, 95% for Larry Fitz, 85% for Christian Kirk. Like it works better when Andy Isabella is a bit more involved. Where I'm hopeful that might actually be the case this week is with the two questionable tight ends. So if the team cannot run as many tight end heavy sets, possibly that means more snaps for my guy Andy Isabella. 2K, we're talking one big play necessary to pay off Andy Isabella. But again, Max Williams, Daryl Daniels, Dan Arnold, these guys are all options. They're all going to project out very similarly in terms of targets and in terms of playing time. Daryl Daniels saw his snaps decrease down to 19% last week. But overall, you got a couple guys banged up and on the injury report. Williams and Daniels on the injury report. That's going to be a slight bump up for Dan Arnold and what we project for him. As we look into sort of like the tertiary options for Seattle, David Moore, 4,800, guy I'm really interested in. Greg Olsen, 3,600. Now, I know people are going to be really interested when they look at Greg Olsen's peripheral numbers. Saw a big increase in snaps last week. But I think that's because Jacob Hollister, who has been emerging as the starting tight end there in Seattle over Greg Olsen and over Will Dissly, was actually knocked out early. I believe it was a head injury there for Jacob Hollister. So with Hollister missing the majority of that game, sort of got derailed. But I think you could see Hollister be sort of the low-owned guy at a really cheap price that allows you to make a lot of other things work. So I'm really interested in Hollister there. Freddie Swain, a guy who continues to get snaps. He's been 27%, 28%, 34%, 37% of the team's snaps. Ran 33%, 39% of the team's dropbacks, routes on team's dropbacks last 2 weeks. So we're talking to a guy who's going to be on the field about a third of the time, going to run about a third of the routes. But could that be enough to elevate? So I think there was a point in time where I considered Freddie Swain and David Moore to be very, very similar. I think David Moore definitely pull ahead of Freddie Swain at this point. For sure, as the number 3 wide receiver in the offense. But Freddie Swain, a guy who could get a boost with an injury to Tyler Lockett. But ultimately, Hollister there, among my favorite guys to play on this slate. Let's take a look at the captain spot where, again, we ran these numbers with Chris Carson marked as in. So we'll rerun those, get those posted up on the website. But ultimately, Russ Wilson is the top captain choice here this week. Another week where the quarterback captain rises to the top. And I think a lot of that has to do, with the fact that he has a tremendous amount of rushing equity. He and Kyler Murray, for that matter, have a tremendous amount of rushing equity. His price is considerably less than Kyler Murray's. And we think there's a chance that we could spread this ball out to not only Metcalf, but also to David Moore and some of those tertiary options there on the Seattle side. So a little surprising to see Russell Wilson there, but a guy who can accumulate points that many ways is going to be very, very viable. DeAndre Hopkins, next guy on the list, certainly makes sense. Contains maybe a ceiling. He and Metcalf, probably a ceiling that nobody else really has on the slate. Following Hopkins is Kyler Murray, then DK Metcalf, and then a big teardrop before we get down to Tyler Lockett. So really, if you just focused on those 4 core plays at the captain position, I think you'd be in good shape. And it's kind of surprising to see more and more quarterbacks popping up as captain here as we get later and later in the year. As we look at our flex appearances, obviously the 2 quarterbacks make for tremendous flex options. The 2 stud receivers, Hopkins and Metcalf, but then we get into the running back position. Kenyan Drake, Chase Edmonds, both. Look how tight that is. I mean, both of them going to appear right around 25% of the lineups. So you're basically going to want to have at least one Arizona running back in there about half the time, if that makes sense. Jacob Hollister, another guy we talked about, is going to pop in there a lot. Andy Isabella. The kickers and defenses, we normally don't think about kickers and defenses a ton in high-scoring games, but you can certainly consider kickers and defenses on a high-scoring slate. You think about the way the slate dynamics work. What if the Cardinals are moving the ball all over the field but don't convert in the red zone? Cliff Kingsbury loves kicking field goals. So keep that in mind as you're figuring out how you want to approach the slate. But there's a lot of ways to go here, guys. Hope you have the information you need. Check out nerdball.com for continued updates throughout the day. This looks like a really, really fun one. I encourage you not just to only think about shootout slates, what if this game just sucks? Like, what could that look like as well? There's a lot of different ways to build. Showdown is more of a game than it is about knowing who the best plays are. Knowing who the best plays are helps you formulate your strategy, but you have to know exactly how to play this high variance game. That's what we're doing here. So appreciate you guys joining us. We'll see you Sunday night for the Sunday night show. We'll be back Monday as well. See you later.